Jumping, jumping, jumping. Not great, really. What about sitting or a hand target instead of jumping? It is better, right? Joseph from Tremi, please. Let's talk about it. I work with a lot of clients that want to reduce how much their dogs jump, especially when greeting a person. The key to this is actually not to suppress the behavior, but instead to find an adequate alternative behavior. I will offer a few options in this video. A good place to start is to ask ourselves, what's the function? What's the function of this behavior in this specific situation? In my experience, the answer to that question varies a little bit, but often it happens because the dog gets some form of response from us. See, we are usually very good at ignoring the dog when they are calmly sitting, standing, or lying down, and at paying attention to them when they jump. It sort of should be the other way around, right? With that previous statement, I am mainly talking about how we respond to certain behaviors. But if we really want to change the jumping behavior, we also need to focus on what happens before the dog jumps. First things first, keep in mind that rehearsal can often function as reinforcement. So we should modify our environment and what we do so that rehearsal of jumping is minimized while we work on this behavior. However, life is often messy, so I will say this. Do not worry with being perfect at this from one day to the next. Focus on doing as much as you can and on working diligently on this, but do not get discouraged if some jumping still happens. Okay, so here's what we are going to do. First, we need some management in place. If a dog greets visitors by jumping, you need to have the dog dragging a light leash under supervision when guests are arriving, or you need to use a baby gate or another barrier for those initial minutes. With some enthusiastic greeters, you might even need to put the dog somewhere else initially. Out and about, a leash can help tremendously with this, and you might need to reconsider how many strangers you are allowing your dog to approach, or to approach your dog. The look at that game or the engage-disengage game can be very helpful replacement activities for dogs that like to approach and jump on strangers. Second, we need to educate the people that interact with our dogs on how to do it. I'll probably do a more extensive video on this topic in the future, but basically, we humans tend to greet dogs in a way that is really not adequate and appropriate for most dogs. We often lean down and stare them straight in the eyes. We sometimes go for a pat on the head straight away, and we love to greet them with a lot of excitement. Do you want to know what I do when I am in the presence of an unknown dog or when I first walk into a client's house? Well, I am fairly neutral and boring to the dog. I usually avoid touching them, and I always avoid any excited greeting. If the dog is showing calm behavior such as sitting, I'll often casually say something like, "Well done, buddy." Sometimes I will ask the dog's owner to tell him he is a good boy and slowly hand him a treat. If the dog is very excited and showing lots of high energy behaviors such as jumping, I will totally ignore the dog and ask the owner to use a management solution such as putting the dog on the lead. I do not extend my hand for the dog to sniff, and I tend to reserve any physical greetings for a bit later when I am no longer something super new and exciting. The chest area or the side of the body are probably good bets for some physical contact, but I only do this if I determine that the dog is showing some interest in that proximity, and also if I do not think that it will generate any jumping. Also, slow, gentle stroking is better than enthusiastically tapping. Question for you: what triggers your dog to jump? Let me know in the comment section below. Alright, the fun part now. Let's teach the dog an alternative behavior. With most dogs, I like to teach a default sit. When in doubt, just put your bottom on the floor and good things will happen. Sit for greeting, sit for going out the back door, sit to put the leash on and go for a walk, sit before I put anything interesting on the floor. We want to see lots and lots of sitting and let the dog know how wonderful she is for doing that. Early on, When the dog is learning this concept, I find that food reinforcers are very helpful, and I like to have them available throughout the house so that we are able to reinforce sitting pretty much everywhere. You can also carry a treat pouch around. When we see good behavior, we should be able to reinforce it. If the jumping has a really strong reinforcement history at the door, one good solution is to have a baby gate there so that we can get the alternative behavior without rehearsal of the jumping. When this becomes second nature to the dog, we can remove the physical barrier. When the dog is fluent on the default sit, we can also start to reduce the amount of food treats we are using if that is our goal. For sitting, some verbal encouragement or even the simple progression to the next behavior, for example, sit followed by go through the door, is often enough to maintain the sitting behavior in the long term. There has been a small number of dogs that I've worked with that I ended up going with another alternative behavior, such as a hand target or a shoulder to knee target. Now, do you remember what's the function from earlier? Well, with some dogs, they are really keen on some physical contact, and that is the function of the jumping behavior. Those target behaviors can work really well for these dogs. Another option that I have sometimes used was to teach the dog to go to a certain station or bed near the door and that some reinforcement will follow. Now, what should we do if a dog is already jumping? That's coming up in just a second, but first I want to invite you to subscribe to my YouTube channel and to hit that like button under the video. Also, I kind of run on coffee when I am preparing these videos. If you would like to offer me one or two, follow the link in the description under the video. I will leave some additional resources, including books that I recommend there, so definitely check it out. If a dog is already jumping, I suggest ignoring the dog and see if an alternative behavior, such as standing or sitting, is offered, to then pay attention to the dog. If there is too much jumping and no breaks offered, then you need a management solution, as mentioned earlier, or you need to remove yourself from the situation. Where I differ a little bit from conventional suggestions is that I do not recommend this ignoring and be a tree approach as our primary teaching option. We should have things in place that reduce the likelihood of jumping in the first place, and then we need to actively work on setups that teach the dog what the alternative behavior is. I also do not recommend punishing the dog or saying no or stop it. In his book, Easy Peasy Puppy Squeezy, Steve Mann talks about the dead dog test. If a dead dog can achieve it, then it isn't a behavior you can cue. A dead dog won't jump on you. What this means is that we want to ask our dogs to do something, not to stop doing something. It is a much more elegant way to go about dog training, and all the good trainers do that. As always, get help from a progressive behavior consultant, and if you want to learn about the engage-disengage game mentioned earlier, check out this video here. Obrigado e até a próxima!